The body was discovered at the break of Talvara's twin dawns, crumpled at the base of the Temple of Neural Flame, an area strictly forbidden to all lower caste attendants. He had no name, only a designation. C09, a genetically pruned servant assigned to sanitation tasks in the western wing of the Seraphi's palace. To the inner circle of C09 aristocracy, it was a minor disruption, a negligible blip in the palace's seamless rhythm. The High Executor ordered the remains to be dissolved, the corridor sterilized, and the incident logged as a neurological misfire. Officially, C09 had suffered cognitive detachment, a common flaw in genetically diluted servants, whose minds occasionally snapped under the pressure of the Hive's empathic resonance. Case closed. Unofficially, it wasn't the first time. 12 cycles prior, another servant, Tylo 7, had collapsed in the Garden of Echoes. Fingers blackened from interfacing with a biorestricted console near the command chamber. 5 cycles before that, a kitchen attendant exploded into spasms after attempting to memorize a map he should never have seen. Always nameless, always forgotten, but this one C09 had left something behind. A shard, not just any shard, a dermalin-coated microcrystal wedged beneath his thumbnail, etched with memory particles that could not be read by viral synapses. The technology was ancient by Talvaran standards, inelegant, crude, and human. That alone should have raised alarm bells. It didn't. Because the Virell were proud, brilliant, blind, their minds intertwined through the ether lace, a neurological network that allowed them to think in symphonies and command through intention. They didn't bother with passwords or hard drives or retinal scans. When a Virell desired a door to open, it opened. When they wished to silence dissent, silence fell like a velvet curtain. To them, Earth was still a fledgling, a blue marble soaked in radiation and impulse, useful only as a tactical checkpoint between the inner rim and the galactic east. And yet, it was Earth that had seeded C09, Earth that had trained him, carved him, sent him. He had failed, but failure in this case was part of the design. Because now, he would enter, far above the palace, in a satellite disguised as an abandoned meteor surveyor. A single figure watched the security footage through an analog interface. No ether lace, no shared memory, just raw light and shadow. He watched as C09 was dragged away. He watched as the corridor reset itself, blood turned to vapor. He watched the expression of the High Executor, a slight twitch at the corner of his second mouth, nothing more. The observer was motionless. He hadn't blinked in over an hour. Breath regulated, neural impulses minimal, when the screen dimmed. He removed a black chip from the console, a match to the one C09 had hidden. He placed it into the reader embedded in his wrist. The data flickered to life in his optic lens. Etherlace command grid located. Access point, Temple of Neural Flame. Breach attempt failed. Probability of second attempt, 16%. New vector required. Initiating protocol, Omega Veil. The observer exhaled slowly, his first true breath in hours. He ran a scan through the cranial implant at the base of his skull. Response was immediate. Minor synaptic decay in the frontal lobe. Acceptable. He stood, stripped the surveillance suit, and walked toward the capsule chamber at the rear of the satellite. Inside, a biological cocoon awaited, filled with the greenish serum of memory dilution. He stepped in. As the gel enveloped him, the program began. Genetic overlay, Virell caste servant class. Neural masking complete. Biosignature 010. Personality vector, soft-spoken, compliant, emotionally null. Mission key, Terminus Horizon. He would become one of them, not just in appearance but in thought, movement, heartbeat. Even his pain responses would mirror theirs, but his core would remain human. hidden beneath layers of synthetic obedience. And this time, the palace would not see him coming. Because they were looking for a weapon, a traitor. A soldier, not a servant. Meanwhile, deep within the Seraph's palace, Serentha of the First Flame, crowned daughter of the Virell Highblood, stood beneath a flowing curtain of luminous data. She had sensed it, the disruption, a ripple in the ether lace brief and sharp, like the mental equivalent of a scream muffled in water. Her eyes narrowed, she turned to her steward, that servant, the one found near the flame. Erased, my lady, the steward said. Nothing recovered, no memory signature. She paused. Unlikely, even broken minds leave echoes. My lady, never mind. She stepped toward the glass balcony and looked out over the twin suns as they melted across the city's curved horizon. She felt something, a pattern she couldn't name, like a shadow forming at the edge of a dream. And soon it would have a face, a name, or perhaps the absence of one. Riven had never dreamed of Earth. Not once. Not even in the fleeting half-lucid states the trainers called emotion. Echo, those twilight hours when neural suppression was lowered just enough to keep agents from becoming machines. Others in his unit sometimes spoke of oceans, of forests, of the smell of rain on asphalt. He had none of that. Earth was not home. It was a name on a dossier. A client, a cause, a reason to be built. At 29, Riven had already outlived most members of his original cohort. The silent infiltration division didn't produce veterans. It produced one-time ghosts, creatures engineered not for endurance but for precision. He had been rewired, reborn, and reinserted more times than his medical log could calculate. Each time new skin, new eyes, new bone density calibrations. Each time, a new memory shell fused to suppress the last. But this time there would be no next, 31 days. That's what the mission file said. 31 days to infiltrate the neural lattice of the Virell high caste, extract confirmation of the invasion protocols, and sever their primary command transmission node. After that, survival was optional. He didn't flinch when he read the line, *mission irreversible. Host extraction improbable, collapse authorized. The finality didn't matter. He had no roots, no family, no lover waiting in some gravity-locked dome with trembling hands and unread messages. He had grown up inside the Eastern Strategic Institute, a black ice fortress beneath the Siberian crust, where emotion was a chemical imbalance and love was a liability. Even his name, Riven, was an acronym once. Remote Insertion Variant Engineered Neutrality. Only later did the field officers start calling him Riven like it meant something human. It didn't. He sat now in the sterile white hold of the outbound vessel Yehuda 4 *, watching the holographic scroll of Virell court language loop endlessly in front of his pupils. The language was fluid, constructed as symbiotic syllables designed to mimic emotional states. A lie inside a melody. He'd mastered it in 17 hours. An older man sat across from him, Dr. Han Valen, mission engineer and gene path overseer. Valen was one of the few non-soldier humans to have survived face-to-face contact with Virels. He wore a permanent twitch beneath one eyelid, like a ghost memory that wouldn't leave. "You've been too quiet," Valen said. "I'm supposed to be." "No, I mean unusually quiet, even for you." Riven blinked slowly. "There's nothing to say. You've seen the scans. My limbic response is stable. My memory partitioning is clean. My biological sync with the Virell caste template is at 98%. Yes, but your latency delay during emotional mimicry. It's slowing." Riven turned his head. "Maybe I'm tired of pretending." There was silence between them, pressurized, sterile. "Riven," Valen said, leaning forward, "when you enter that palace, You'll be surrounded by beings who will know the moment your tone hesitates, the second your mental presence fractures. You're not just wearing a mask. You are the mask, don't forget that. I never had anything else, Valen sighed. Then remember this, if you die in there, you won't be buried. You won't be mourned, but you'll be remembered by the algorithms that train the next ghost. Riven didn't respond. The vessel docked on the outer atmosphere ring of Talvera 12 hours later. The planet rose like a living ember beneath them, its twin suns giving the sky a luminous bleed of rose and copper. Cores of green fog pulsed beneath crystalline spires. Networks of light slithered across the continent like veins beneath translucent skin. Riven stood in front of the surgical basin as the final overlay was applied. The viral servant-class genome fused into his bloodstream, rearranging pigment, vocal cords, even the temperature of his skin. He felt the tingle of neural refraction, his inner voice now slightly delayed, distorted like an echo behind glass. His new name was Tulu 10. His eyes were now opalescent gray. His blood had traces of living memory thread woven into it, programmable emotions designed to pulse when triggered by. Viral thought resonance. He could feel it, the false compliance, the synthetic humility. It whispered beneath his real thoughts. As the chamber depressurized, the last phase of mental conditioning played inside his skull. Not words, not commands, just tones carefully selected to dull moral judgment, suppress grief, and slow any attempt at existential resistance. He let them pass through him. Not because he was immune, but because he knew how to store his pain in silence. Final clearance came as he boarded the diplomatic transport shuttle toward the Serentha's palace. The viral gate officer scanned his profile. The moment her neural field grazed his, he bowed, not because he wanted to, but because the implant in his spinal cord pulsed the instinct. The officer narrowed her gaze. "You carry deep grief," she said. Riven looked up, eyes expressionless. "I was born in silence." She seemed satisfied with that. As the shuttle descended into the capital, he gazed out at the bioarchitecture, towers grown, not built, glowing with a dim, conscious light. Every structure was alive, interconnected by the ether lace. Somewhere in that web was the signal, the transmission thread that bound the viral warfleet into one mind. If he severed it, their unity would splinter, their strike against Earth would fail. But the palace was vast. The code was hidden, buried beneath centuries of ritual and genetic protocol. And the timer had begun, 31 days not to survive, to unmake a war, by becoming the most invisible man in the universe. He arrived with the morning shift, his eyes lowered, posture calibrated to radiate submission. The shuttle doors sighed open, releasing a line of low-caste attendants into the soft-lit corridors of the Serentha's palace. The architecture was not built, it breathed, walls curved like cartilage. Floors pulsed with ambient neural light, shifting subtly beneath his feet, as if reacting to his presence. Riven, now officially Tulu 5, was processed in silence. A viral overseer flicked her fingers through a gesture interface, scanning his neural pattern without a word. No physical contact, no eye contact, just a momentary psychic brushing, cold, sterile, efficient. He passed, assigned to the inner quarters of Serentha, the third flame and heiress to the Virell Highblood. He was instructed to attend to ambient maintenance, environmental adjustment, pheromone balance, scent diffusion. Tasks designed to be invisible, and for a man like Riven, perfect. He didn't speak for the first 2 days, not out loud. Not inward, he observed. He walked through the parasite's heart and studied how it fed. The first thing he noticed, there were no locks. Not a single door, console, or corridor was sealed by mechanism. Everything operated through the ether lace, thought-triggered security woven into the viral's collective cognition. A room knew who should enter. A console responded to desire. Secrets, therefore, were not kept in safes but in minds. It made infiltration both impossible and elegantly vulnerable. If he could isolate the central node, the neural nexus that controlled the collective reflex, he could crash the entire lattice. Not with bombs, with silence, but that node was hidden, buried deep within the temple of neural flame, and only the Highblood had access. Serentha was not what he expected. She didn't speak to her servants through the ether lace. She spoke aloud, with words, imperfect, cumbersome, human-like words. "To Lu 5, she said, turning from her meditation pool on the third morning. "You're quiet even for your kind," Riven bowed. "Quiet serves purpose, my lady." She looked at him, eyes a strange blend of blue and luminous silver. "Do you know what purpose is? It is to fulfill the needs of the hive." "That's the answer of a breeder drone." Riven tilted his head. "Then what is purpose to you?" She paused, as if startled that he had asked. "Then, to question what the hive never dares to answer." He filed that away. It was on the fifth night that the invitation came. A private convergence of nobles, discreet, exclusive, unlisted on the ether-lace logs. The kind of gathering where decisions were not debated, but performed. Riven was summoned to assist with atmospheric balance. A euphemism for making sure the guests felt what they were supposed to feel: awe, amusement, superiority. The hall was shaped like an open iris. Bioluminescent vines cascaded from the ceiling like silent waterfalls. The floor rippled beneath their feet, calibrated to their emotional patterns. Laughter did not echo, it resonated, harmonizing into unsettling musical tones. At the center of the room, a projection bloomed to life. A simulation, the conquest of Earth, not theoretical. Not strategic, rehearsed. Cities Tokyo, Nairobi, Santiago, rendered in perfect fractal detail, collapsed under spectral fire. Population models screamed in silence as plasma pulses tore through them. The nobles clapped, not with hands, but with pulses of light through their neural bands. "Efficient," one noble purred. "The South American cortex shatters under less than 2 seconds of neural saturation. Primitive minds," another chuckled. "So easily ruptured." Riven did not move. He stood by the scent diffusers, adjusting chemical ratios with fingers that didn't tremble. Inside, however, something ancient rose, rage, raw and wordless. Not because Earth was being destroyed in their minds, but because they did not even hate it. They mocked it like a child stepping on ants. Then he heard her, Serentha. She was seated among them, though slightly apart, her neural band dimmed to half-light. She watched the simulation with a stillness Riven recognized, not absence of thought, but concealment. After the final model fell, one of the generals, a bloated Virell with 4 spectral limbs and a war tattoo etched in living flame, turned to her. "Will you join the incursion, my lady? The strike against Terra will crown your right of ascent." Serentha held his gaze for a long moment. "No," she said quietly. "There's no glory in performing a symphony to which the orchestra is already deaf." Laughter, confusion, dismissal, but Riven saw it. The flicker of resistance, the tiniest fracture in the hive's polished mind. Later that night, as the hall emptied, Riven returned to recalibrate the pheromone levels. Serentha remained seated, her gaze fixed on the fading projection of Earth. "You watched it without flinching," she said suddenly. "I am trained not to flinch," she turned, "but you wanted to." He said nothing. She stood slowly approaching him, her steps soft on the breathing floor. "Tell me, to Lu 5, do you know what it's like to see your own species celebrated as obsolete?" "I do not understand the question." She stopped inches from him. "No, I suppose you wouldn't." Riven looked up into her eyes, and for the first time he felt something slip. Not emotion, not identity, recognition. They were both out of place here. but only one of them knew why, and somewhere behind her gentle tone and controlled breath, he saw the same question buried deep. What do you do when the world you serve begins to rot from the inside? It began with a whisper. Not a sound, but a pulse. A subtle hum reverberating through the temple walls, vibrating in the marrow of his bones. The Hall of Biothought Archives was alive, more organism than architecture. Its corridors curled like the inside of a shell, lined with sensory membranes that responded to cognitive presence. Riven moved slowly, heart rate throttled down to mimic Virell meditation. He wore the scent of obedience, every motion bled submission. But his mind, his real mind, was sharp, calculating pathways, scanning pulses, timing the breath of the building itself. The security here wasn't made of walls or codes, it was made of memory. The Hive's most sacred space was guarded by living cognition, a biomechanical core that rejected foreign thought the way. A body rejects poison. He reached the archive nexus, a pulsing sphere suspended above a shallow pool of neural gel. Tendrils of light weaved through it like synapses, twitching with every movement. This was the brain of the palace. It stored not only strategy but intent. War plans encoded in emotional frequency, projections powered by empathy resonance. He removed the extraction spike from the hollow inside his forearm. A thin, iridescent filament extended, trembling with energy. He slid it gently into the side of the sphere. The response was immediate. A flood of images poured into his mind, battle simulations, star maps, neural override protocols, planetary invasion scripts. Most crucial of all, a countdown, 72 hours until strike deployment. The Virell fleet would initiate the cascade by severing Earth's outer orbit communications, the sensor array embedded in the moon's crust. After that, the Hive would bleed through unopposed. And then the voice came, not Serentha, not his handlers. Not his asterisk memory deviation detected, identity mismatch. Resolve required. The sphere pulsed violently, Riven staggered back. The floor beneath his feet turned soft, too soft. Biogel tendrils slithered upward, wrapping around his ankles. A low-frequency drone hit his temples like a jackhammer. Foreign element identified, emotional pattern incompatible. Integration denied. His body began to sink, not into water but into living tissue. The archive was trying to digest him, convert him into biofuel for its memory mesh. He didn't panic. Panic was an obsolete protocol. He activated the override in his wristband, a localized disruption pulse. Enough to sever the neural tethers for 10 seconds. The gel screamed. It recoiled like burned flesh, releasing his legs in a wet gasp. He fell sideways, rolled onto the hard floor beyond the activation radius, and crawled toward the exit. His hands were covered in the translucent slime of aborted assimilation. He didn't look back. He reached the empty corridor. The walls flickered with confused biolight, still unsure whether to sound alarm. His spine burned where the tendrils had touched his skin. His breath was ragged too fast, sloppy. He stabilized. He stood, and then he saw her, Serentha. She stood at the end of the corridor alone, her expression unreadable. No guards, no warning, just her. "You accessed the archives," she said quietly. Not a question. He straightened. "I got lost. You're lying." The silence stretched between them, tense and fragile. Then she stepped forward. No aggression, just curiosity strangely human. "Why?" she asked. "Why risk everything?" Riven didn't answer. She narrowed her eyes. "Do you think Earth will survive? That your people, fragmented, selfish, drunk on chaos, can resist what's coming?" Still, he said nothing. So she asked the question that pierced deeper than the sphere's tendrils ever could. "Why doesn't your kind surrender?" The hallway dimmed. Riven exhaled slowly. Because surrender isn't the absence of violence. It's the absence of choice. She studied him, her voice quiet but unrelenting. You think we're monsters? No, he said. I think you forgot how to ask why. She tilted her head. And Earth hasn't, he paused. Earth remembers it too much. We burn with why, we stab each other with it. But at least we still bleed when we do. The words surprised him. Not because they were clever, but because they were true. For a moment, Serentha looked tired, the kind of tired that lives beneath generations of inherited decisions. I've read your history, she said. Your wars, your holocausts, your machine uprisings. You worship trauma like it's proof of soul, and you erased it like it never mattered. That silence again, heavy, intimate, not hostile but almost sad. He turned to leave. You're not one of them, she said softly. Not truly Virell, not truly servant. He froze. You have an echo in your gait. A delay between thought and movement. You suppress your pain like it's an enemy, not an impulse. He turned slowly. Then why haven't you reported me? She stepped closer. Because if you're willing to die to stop what's coming, maybe I need to ask what it is we're doing. Back in his chamber, he uploaded the stolen data into a dead signal transmitter hidden behind the scent filtration grate. The spike glowed blue, confirmation of successful transfer. Earth Command would now receive the exact trajectory, timing and breach method of the Virell assault. But as he sat down, hand trembling slightly, something gnawed at him. The voice, not the archive, his own. Would you die for Earth or just to prove you were never part of anything else? He clenched his fist. His entire life had been built on sacrifice. One mission after another, one body replaced by another. One false language layered over another. But this was the first time someone had looked at him and seen the cracks. Serentha wasn't his enemy, but she wasn't his ally either. She was a mirror, one that showed him a life made only of reactions. And for the first time, Riven asked himself a question without an assigned answer. If I'm not one of them, and I'm no longer one of us, then who the hell am I saving? The chamber that housed the living I, M letter 1 EAFT, S letter 1 ED1NG, was deeper than any place Riven had yet been allowed to enter. It was not a room, but a womb, carved into the nervous system of the palace itself. The walls glowed with a rhythmic pulse, synchronized to the heartbeats of those connected to the ether lace. Everything here was alive, thinking, feeling, and vulnerable. The eye was a sphere of translucent neural matter, suspended in a lattice of light and sound. It trembled softly, as if dreaming. Within its translucent core, pulses of data flickered like stars. Every soldier in the Virell fleet, every ship, every weapon, every command line, they all passed through this core. It was the spinal cord of the Hive. Riven stood at the edge of the interface bridge, eyes fixed on the control stem. One hand hovering over the encoded relay that would initiate cascade failure. If he inserted the spike and triggered the neural rupture, the effect would be instant. The fleet would lose cohesion, the invasion would stall. But so would hundreds of minds still connected, some soldiers, yes, but also nobles, civilians, children. And Serentha, he had confirmed it earlier that day, she remained linked to the ether lace. Her consciousness always brushing against the perimeter of the living eye. There would be no protection from the backlash. This wasn't a soldier's kill. It was surgical genocide, and yet Earth hung on that choice. He reached into his coat and retrieved the activation spike. Its tip glowed cold blue, pulsing with the code required to trigger the fracture. Then he heard it. You hesitate, came the voice. He turned. T letter 1B0, letter 1EDB, NG Velen stepped into the chamber like a phantom, armored in synaptic plate that shimmered with thought energy. His skin gleamed metallic red, his gaze unblinking. I knew at the moment I first saw you, Velen said, voice deep and resonant. The echo lag in your response, the faint dissonance in your mind print. You don't think like us. Riven didn't move. Velen's eyes narrowed. And now, here you are, ready to commit murder in the name of salvation. Riven spoke calmly. I don't want to kill them. Then why bring a blade to a mind's cradle? Velen's neural bands flared. Do you think yourself righteous, human, a protector of your crumbling rock? I think, Riven said, stepping back toward the console, that you've mistaken connection for control. Velen struck. His body shimmered, and a wave of kinetic bioforce slammed toward Riven like liquid air. Riven Dove rolled, and fired a pulse round from the weapon concealed in his boot. The round ricocheted off Velen's armor, dispersing with a hiss of disrupted cognition. You fight with relics, Velen said, raising his hand. Tendrils of psychic energy lashed out, grabbing Riven by the chest and slamming him into the wall. Agony flooded his nervous system, not pain but confusion. Velen was overriding his motor cortex, injecting impulses meant to short his reflexes. Riven gritted his teeth, fought for control. You don't belong here, Velen growled. You're a crack in the system, a corrupted signal. And you, Riven said, voice strained, are so entangled in your own mind that you can't see the collapse. He launched his final countermeasure, a short-burst neural dampener implanted at the base of his skull. The blast sent out a shockwave of null thought, temporarily disabling all ether-lace-dependent functions within 5 meters. Velen staggered, momentarily cut off from the hive. Riven moved fast, sliding across the floor, jamming the spike not into the core, ***, but into the command resonance relay. Not full destruction, something else, an infection. He activated the signal, a false data stream carefully forged back in orbit. It simulated an internal etherlace revolt, a rogue mental feedback loop originating from a high-priority fleet node. To the system, it would appear as if the hive was turning on itself. The response would be immediate: protect the mind. Recall the arms. Already, the chamber lights flickered as the living eye processed the fake emergency. Emergency protocols took over. Commands raced backward through the hive's nervous system. Ships began turning. Fleets withdrew from their assault vectors. Orders contradicted themselves. Velen lunged forward, reactivated, howling in psychic rage. He slammed into Riven with a blow that cracked 2 ribs. You've doomed yourself, he roared. No, Riven gasped, backing away. I gave your system exactly what it feared most. And what is that? A thought it didn't control. Velen reached for him, but the chamber shuddered. Walls buckled inward. Alarms not of sound but of dissonant thought screamed through the walls. The system was unraveling. Velen hesitated. He looked back at the eye. Too late, Riven said, blood dripping from his mouth. You've built your empire on perfect signal. I gave it static. Velen turned and ran toward the command stem, trying to sever the false broadcast. But it was embedded now, disguised as internal command, looping endlessly. Riven limped to the side hatch, eyes scanning the biosignature panel. It still read Virell. His disguise remained. He exited and left chaos behind. Hours later, he sat in the hidden corner of the palace's lowest maintenance shaft, watching the hive ripple with confusion. Orders countered orders. Fleets doubled back, commanders panicked. The invasion was postponed. The Highblood called for isolation, and Serentha disappeared from the etherlace. Whether she was harmed in the backlash or had disconnected herself by choice, he didn't know. He didn't want to. In the silence, his thoughts turned inward. He hadn't destroyed the eye. He hadn't saved everyone. He had lied to both sides, but for the first time in his life, he had chosen asterisk. Not a mission, not an order, a decision that wasn't programmed. And that was the betrayal no one had prepared for. Not of the hive, not of Earth, but of the belief that he was only a tool asterisk. Because the moment he forged a third path, one of deception instead of slaughter, one that preserved life instead of simplifying the moral math, he became something alien to both worlds. A question, a glitch, a voice inside the system whispering, "What if we didn't have to kill to win?" The Virell fleet fractured within hours. What had once been a synchronized web of intention collapsed into a chaos of conflicting signals. Destroyers turned in mid-flight, carriers aborted warp paths, and command ships began broadcasting emergency recall protocols to themselves, caught in recursive loops that made leadership impossible. No missiles were launched, no cities burned, no soldiers bled. The invasion of Earth unraveled not with a scream, but with confusion. From orbit, Earth's satellites captured the Virell fleet retreating in waves, silent, disoriented, and leaderless. No one on Earth knew why. The global network spun theories ranging from divine intervention to secret peace deals. The truth remained off-grid, buried in the neural static of a war that never became one. And far from both worlds, in a medical capsule under the crust of Talvara's secondary moon, Riven lay motionless. Velen's final blow had done more than shatter ribs. The synaptic overload had ruptured a delicate sector of his brain, an area the training files had once called a motive core 2. It was the last unaugmented piece of his neural system, the part still truly human. Now it was gone. When he woke 3 days later, he felt nothing. Not numbness, not grief, just an eerie, colorless clarity. He remembered the mission. He remembered Serentha's eyes. He remembered choosing a third path, but when he tried to feel something about it, there was only silence. He didn't return to Earth. The invitation came, high priority. Signed by the Eastern Strategic Command, "Return, Riven. You've earned your home," but he no longer had one. Instead, he requested a permit to remain in the outer sectors. Denied at first, then quietly approved. No ceremony. No debriefing. No monument, just absence. 5 months later, on the twilight side of Saturn's outer rings, an unauthorized structure appeared, Station Haven 7. No military markings. No allegiance. A quiet refuge equipped with minimal life support and a rudimentary docking bay. Inside, Riven built something not for infiltration, but for shelter. He filled it with others, drifters, defectors, damaged minds. Individuals who had once been part of a war, not just as soldiers, but as data. Victims of ether-lace collapse, of forced synchronization, of identity fragmentation. They came quietly. Word spread among the unspoken networks, "If you've forgotten who you are, he'll let you remember in silence." Riven spoke little. He moved slowly. His body healed, but his face remained unreadable. He listened but never commented, offered food, water, safety. Never judgment. He had become a sanctuary of sorts, flesh and metal that bore no emotion, but carried the weight of many. Serentha's fate was never confirmed. The Highblood archives redacted her neural signature. Some whispered she was imprisoned beneath the palace, severed from the ether lace and kept in stasis. Others believed she removed her mind link herself and walked into the desert of the mindless, self-exiled. Riven never asked, never searched, but each night he stood beneath the flickering auroras of Saturn's outer sky and watched the static storms pass, not in hope, but in recognition. Years passed, peace held, but it was a cold peace, built not on trust but on disruption. The Virell never launched another attempt. Earth rebuilt, fortified, and studied, but it never learned the true reason why it had been spared. And Riven never told them, not because he was sworn to silence, but because he no longer had a language for victory. One day, at the Future Institute, an academy built on what was once the orbital battlefield of Earth's last defense, Grid, a guest lecture was held. A historian presented a segment on the war that didn't happen. He showed footage of the fleet turning away, of Earth preparing for extinction and then suddenly spared. At the end of the session, a student raised her hand. "Professor," she asked, "do you think it's possible to win a war and have nothing left to celebrate?" The professor paused. Behind him, a faded image lingered, an old recording, grainy, unverified. It showed a man standing at the edge of a gas station on Saturn's rings. His face blurred, no name, just a line of text encoded beneath the image, Tulu 5, status unlisted. The professor smiled faintly. "There was once a servant," he said, "a man who chose not to fight with weapons but with deception. Not because he feared violence, but because he believed there was something worse." The class leaned in. He was never called a hero, never claimed a side, but in the space between war and surrender, he made a choice no one else saw. A third path, a quiet one. The professor looked up at the class. "They say he paid for that choice with the last part of himself that was human. But perhaps that was the only part worth giving, silence." Then the bell rang, and somewhere far from Earth, beneath the dim orange swirl of Saturn's forgotten moons, a man stood at the edge of a frozen deck, watching, waiting, feeling nothing but remembering everything.